Book 4, Chapter 7, Lost in the Grass. Doreen was irritated before she even knew why. It came to her a moment later, the way these things did. A hand on her shoulder gripping too hard, and a voice running too fast above her, and the words making no sense at all. Roots, cutting, a tree that sang. She kept her breathing slow out of long habit, kept her eyes shut a heartbeat longer than she needed to, the way she always did when she woke to a hand she hadn't invited, taking stock of the threat before she let it know she was awake. Then she let her lids crack. Zyra. Of course it was Zyra. Crouched over her, pale and wild-eyed, hair loose and tangled from the bedroll, her fingers digging into Doreen's shoulder like the grip of a drowning woman.
Up! Doreen, up! We have to go! We have to go now!
All right.
Doreen's voice came out flat and gravel-thick with sleep.
All right, love, I'm up. You can stop trying to pull my arm off.
She rolled onto her back and forced her eyes the rest of the way open. The sky above the camp was a low quilt of gray cloud, the kind that promised nothing and threatened nothing. No rain in it. Good. She'd had her fill of marching through mud and sleeping in damp wool. A dry day was a small mercy, and she'd long since learned to take the small ones, the world being stingy with the large. She sat up, knuckling at her eyes, and looked around. Karma had been on watch. She could tell by the way he stood, stiff, alert, his burned cheek turned away from the camp out of some private vanity, the makeshift bandage on his thigh stained through brown. He was following Zyra around the camp like a man trailing a runaway horse, one hand half lifted, his mouth working through reasonable words at an unreasonable subject.
Miss Darkmeyer, we are far from the Green Dragon. There is no reason to think it would be coming back now. Miss Darkmeyer, listen to me.
But Zyra cut him off the way a frantic old woman cuts off a peddler at her door, with a wave of the hand and a torrent of her own, and away she went again about the hermit, a black tree that drank blood and turned it into a song, and dragons being drawn by the singing of it. Or something equally confused, Doreen thought. She couldn't follow half of it and didn't try. In Doreen's opinion, and Doreen had opinions about all of them, Zyra had grown more erratic of late. The woman had always been impulsive, always changeable as weather, one moment all silk and aristocratic poise, and the next a cornered animal. But there was something under it now that hadn't been there before. Something Doreen recognized because she'd seen it on faces in the worst rooms of the worst houses she'd ever worked. Desperation, the look of someone who had stopped believing there was a floor beneath them. Doreen pulled her water skin to her mouth and drank long and slow, watching the pair over the rim of it. Then she corked it, rose from her bedroll with a luxurious stretch that popped half the bones in her spine, and began gathering her things with unhurried competence. Bow, quiver, the little roll of picks she trusted more than any blade. Her boots, which she shook out from habit before she pulled them on, because you never knew what crawled into a boot in the night. Zyra had her pack on her back already, and Karma had finally run out of reasonable words, and he had turned away, muttering to himself, to collect his own gear. There was a small, ugly satisfaction in watching the Iron Paladin lose an argument. Behind her, Balin started in with one of his.
You know what they say among my people. A stream that runs too fast carves no channel, but the fast ones still carve. You'd do well to remember which you are.
Doreen stopped, a baffled look on her face. What in the world did that even mean? Why wouldn't a faster stream carve a channel? Why should anyone need to know whether they were a fast stream or a slow one? What did it mean? There was no logic in it, no logic at all in why a dwarf would say a thing with no logic in it. Her head was beginning to ache. At last she answered in a flat, dry voice.
Fine.
Balin's brows sank. the look of a man who'd offered something and watched it being thrown to the dirt. Less than an hour brought them within sight of the dragon cultists' stronghold, the same fortified palisade of sharpened stakes they had stormed days before. Doreen smelled it before she saw it properly, wood smoke rising lazy and unhurried over the stakes. Karma lifted a fist and they stopped in the brush. He sent Ilara forward with a jerk of his chin, and the elf melted into the scrub and was gone for a span of breaths, and then was back crouching among them with that bright, unsettling stillness on his face.
2 hill giants, by the cave mouth. They've a fire going. Cooking.
His head tilted.
Horse meat, I think. There's a smell of it. Lily doesn't like the smell.
Then came the part Doreen hated most, the planning. Karma and Balin and Zira drew into a tight circle and began to talk, low and quick, hands chopping the air to sketch lines of attack. 2 giants, the cave at their backs, the gate, the angles, who would hold and who would flank. Doreen drifted into the circle too, because not drifting in would have been noticed, and stood among them with her face a study in attention. But the words slid off her like rain off oiled leather, and her mind went somewhere else entirely. It went, as it so often did now, to her inventory. Not the inventory in her pack. She could account for every copper and pick and vial in that without looking. The other inventory, the one nobody knew she had, the things she had pried loose, overheard, gathered up by accident or by patient design. Information which kept its worth when coin didn't, and which a clever woman could trade in any city she landed in. So she took stock. First, the plot to kill Zira, the heaviest thing she owned. She'd had it fresh, the night before last, while 2 men forgot the night carried sound. A bad stone has to be cleared from the wall, Balin had said. If Zira's blood ever took her, they would put her down. Doreen had told no one, especially not Zira. Then Karma himself, the contradiction of him. He talked in his sleep, and on the bad nights the names came broken. Angela, high hold, and once, low in a register she'd never heard him use awake. Zira's name. A man did not murmur a woman's name like that for someone he merely hated. That was valuable, because contradictions were the cracks you levered. And smaller coins besides, Harbin Wester's fat face falling when the party came back from the lighthouse alive. The name Celine dropped once just to watch Zira go still and brittle and change the subject to smooth. She turned them over now, all of them, the way she turned a gem to the light to catch its flaws. Something about the lot of them pressed at her, a shape she couldn't quite see, an answer just under the surface, as if she held every key to a lock and couldn't work out which way to turn them. The plot, the mirages, Karma seeing the traitor, the mad elf seeing his dead sister, the kobolds on their knees seeing a dragon in a woman's skin. 3 sets of eyes, 3 different.
Are you coming?
Doreen surfaced from her thoughts to find Ilara staring at her. She realized with a small cold drop in her gut that she had no idea what they'd decided. The whole plan had gone past her like water under a bridge. She did not want them to know. That was the first rule, deeper than any other. Never let them see the seam. She didn't know what they'd settled on, which meant she didn't know what to object to. And going by the company she kept, whatever it was, could not be anything good. But she'd be all right. She always was. The little charm sat warm against her chest where it always did, and she had a ward tucked up her sleeve quick enough to turn most anything 2 angry giants could throw at her. Let them plan their plan. She'd slip its worst and come out the other side, same as ever. She nodded.
You go first.
Doreen followed Ilara through the brush, toward the palisade, low and quiet. The elf moved like smoke ahead of her, and the slinking and the held breath, and the watching of every footfall, woke something old in her. water-deep alleys, a girl who'd learned that being seen was the same as being caught. Now and again, over the line of sharpened stakes, they caught a glimpse of a giant. A slab of a head here, a hand the size of a cartwheel there, gesturing at something with slow, lazy contempt. The two creatures were talking. Doreen could hear the rumble of it, a sound she felt in her chest more than heard, but the words were nothing she knew. They crept to the foot of the palisade and began to work along it, toward the gate where the timber stood open. 20 meters back, the rest of the group came on in a ragged line, Karma at the front, grim and forward set, Zira behind him, already frightened again, her hands white-knuckled at her sides, and Balin bringing up the rear with a look on his broad face that Doreen had never seen there before. Pure, ancestral, marrow-deep hatred. The dwarf was staring at the giants the way a man stares at the thing that killed his father, and his father's father, and 1,000 fathers back into the dark of the world. Doreen caught Ilara by the edge of his shirt and tugged.
Let the others reach the wall first. Then we start.
Ilara nodded, slow and dreamy. When everyone had reached their marks, Doreen drew a breath, nodded to Ilara, and broke from cover, darting past him toward the open gate. 10 meters away, the two giants sat at their fire, and they were enormous, worse up close than they'd looked over the stakes, mountains of gray muscle and matted hair, each one big enough to wear a horse for a hat. The nearer one had its back to her. The farther one looked up and saw her. A small, bright spike of panic went through Doreen, the old animal jolt of being seen when you'd meant not to be. She did the only thing the panic left room for. She loosed the arrow already half drawn, sank it into the broad, muscled back of the nearer giant, and then she turned and ran, just away, putting ground between herself and the fire, because you didn't need to outrun the lion, only to not be the slowest thing it could reach. Let it take Ilara, who was nearer. Let it take anyone but her. Behind her she heard Ilara's bow sing once, and then the soft thud of the elf retreating behind the palisade in her wake. Doreen's eyes went to Karma and Balin, both of them already hurtling toward the gate, boots tearing the earth. And as Karma surged forward, his bulk shifting aside, Zira was revealed from behind his shoulder, pale, wide-eyed, mid-motion. And in that exact instant, with the picture of all of them spread before her like cards laid on a table, Doreen's mind began at last to turn the lock. Balin and Karma by the fire. 2 nights passed. What in the deep dark is wrong with Mistress Zira, he'd said, the dwarf, that every soul who meets her sees a thing that isn't there. 3 sets of eyes, 3 different mirages. And Doreen had every piece of it, every secret, and the answer was right there, the shape of it finally rising clear out of the fog, the thing the dwarf had stumbled half onto without knowing what he'd touched, the thing that connected the plot and the past and the... A rushing sound came from the direction of the stronghold. Doreen's eyes snapped up. She had just enough time, a fraction of a heartbeat, time enough to know and not enough to move, to see the boulder. Vast and gray and wheeling lazily through the gray sky, thrown by a hand the size of a door, and it filled her whole vision. The stone took her. The force of it flipped her bodily through the air, end over end, the world spinning gray and green and gray, and then the ground rose up and slammed the rest of her thoughts out through the back of her skull. Doreen was somewhere with no edges. She was a girl again, younger, smaller, running. She was always running in these, through the crooked dark streets of a Waterdeep that smelled of brine and rot and fear. Behind her came the shadows, not shadows of things, shadows that were the things given hunger and sent after a child who had stolen what she should never have touched. They had no faces, only the wanting, and she knew that this time they would catch her. The shadows reached for her with their long fingers of nothing, and they closed around her throat. She felt them squeeze, felt the breath stop in her, the airway crushing shut, and she clawed at the cold grip that had no substance to claw at, and the cold of them began, impossibly, to burn. A searing heat at the back of her throat where the choking was. Hotter. Worse. Something forcing its way down where the shadows had their grip, and it was not nothing now, it was liquid, foul and herbal and wrong, flooding into her and her body convulsed around it. Sound came back first, leaking in at the edges, a voice, calling her name.
Doreen! Doreen, come on! Come back! Drink it, Doreen!
Zyra's voice. But Zira wasn't in the dark with the shadows. The voice came from somewhere else, somewhere with edges, somewhere with up and down, and the smell of crushed grass and her own blood. Doreen came back to the world, choking. She wrenched onto her side and coughed the bitter liquid out in a spray, half of it splashing across the front of Zira's dress. And the sorceress didn't flinch from it, only got an arm under Doreen's head and lifted it gently and tipped the last of the vial past her lips. A healing potion. Doreen knew the taste of it now under the bitterness, that hard, sweet undertone of mended flesh. She'd been close then, close to the edge, closer than she'd been in a long while. The last clear thing she had was the gate, following Elara to it, the giants at their fire, the far one looking up. After that, nothing, a blank wall where the next moments should have been. She groped at it and found no handhold, only the throb of her own skull and a dim certainty that there'd been something she'd had hold of, gone now.
Lie still. A giant put a stone through you. You went down hard.
She looked up at Zyra, crouched over her, and the sorceress's face was not cold and not aristocratic and not frightened. It was just there, just present, her hand cradling the back of Doreen's skull, with a tenderness Doreen had no file for, no neat little pocket to fold it into. Doreen tried to say something. Took one for the team, didn't I, she meant to say, something light to put the world back on its hinges. But when she opened her mouth, the pain arrived all at once, vast and pulsing, and what came out was a thick, wet mumble that meant nothing. Her lip had split. The whole left side of her face had swelled tight and hot, throbbing in time with her heart, each beat a fresh hammer blow. A stone, Zira had said. So that was the blank wall. A giant's stone had clipped her and flung her, and a hand's breadth more, and it would have taken her head clean off. No time for it. She knew that bone deep. She got her hands under herself and shoved up, swaying, and Zira steadied her by the elbow, then pressed the fallen bow into her hands.
Don't forget your bow.
Doreen swept her scattered arrows up from the grass with fingers that didn't quite obey, and turned toward the palisade, where the battle had already roared up into full and bloody life. The ground around the open gate had become a slaughter yard. Karma was in the worst of it, caught square between the two giants like a nut in a cracker. He'd charged in to draw them, and drawn them he had, and now both creatures stood over him and hammered down great club strokes from either side, and the paladin could do nothing but raise his shield to one and dodge the other, no opening to land a blow of his own, no breath to spare. Doreen watched him take a glancing strike that staggered him 3 steps sideways, watched him recover and try to plant his feet and get nowhere. The two giants working him between them like a thing they were grinding to paste. He gave ground. He had to. He broke off, finally, limping hard, and turned, not to flee, but to throw himself toward Balin, to make of the two of them one thing instead of 2 dying men. Because Balin had become something terrible to see. The dwarf had spoken to the stone. Light kindled in his eyes, blue and cold as glacier ice, and his body swelled, joints cracking, muscle heaping onto muscle, until he stood twice and more the height of a man. And even so, even swollen with the ancient runic magic of his line, he came barely to the chest of the hill giant, half its size. But the dwarves had hated the giants since before there were songs to remember it by, since the first delvings, since the giants had thrown down the mountain holds, and the dwarves had crawled back up out of the rubble swearing vengeance into their beards. That hate was in Balin's blood the way the dragon was in Zira's, an inheritance, a thing older than the man who carried it, and it came out of him now in a roar that shook the stakes. He spoke again, a single grinding word, and chains erupted from the earth, burning rune-light, white-hot, links the size of shields. They lashed around the nearer giant's legs and waist and dragging arm. It bellowed and tore at them, and the runes only flared brighter and bit deeper, and the smell of burning giant flesh rolled across the yard. Doreen got to her mark and put it to use. She drew and loosed and drew and loosed, sinking shaft after shaft into the chained giant, the soft places, the eye, the great cords of the throat. And Alara was in close beneath it, weaving between its stamping feet, his twin blades flashing as he opened long red seams in its ankles and calves where the chains held it fast. Arrows from the dark, steel from below, fire from the earth. But it was Balin who did the lion's share, and Balin who finished it. The chained giant could not run and could not reach him cleanly, and Balin brought his axe down again and again on the same place, the same notch, hacking through hide and meat, and at last through the great pillar of its leg. The giant toppled. It came down like a felled oak, the earth jumping under it, and before it could so much as roll, Balin was on its skull with the axe, and the bellowing stopped, and the burning chains gutted out into smoke, their work done. One down, and the second came on the worse for it, mad with the death of its kin. The second hill giant fell on Balin in a fury, and the two of them simply stood toe to toe in the churned bloody mud and hit each other. No art to it, no flank, no feint. The giant's club came down, and Balin took it on his shoulder and answered with the axe. Balin's axe bit deep, and the giant answered with a backhand that should have ended any living thing. Blow for blow, both of them bleeding, sheeting blood, the giant's grey hide running red, and Balin's beard matted dark with his own, and still neither would fall. The paladin had given up on landing blows of his own. He'd seen where the fight had to be won, and made himself its second. Each time a giant's club drove Balin to one knee. Each time the blood ran too freely and the dwarf's swing went wide and weak. Karma was there, a hand to the dwarf's back, the cold, clean fire of horror pouring out of him and into Balin's broken places, knitting and bracing, buying one more blow, one more, one more. He could not match the dead man whose sword he carried, but he could do this. He could keep another man standing. When the giant raised its club for another splitting stroke, Karma stepped in. He left Balin's side, and he came in low and fast despite the limp, and he gathered everything he had left, every coal of his god's cold fire, and he leapt. Talon went up over his head and came down with the whole weight of him behind it, and Hor's judgment burned along the blade as it fell, and it opened the giant from hip to ribs in one long, terrible stroke. The smite flared white. The giant's insides came out. It looked down at itself with a dull, stupid astonishment, took one wavering step, and then the second hill giant fell. The yard went quiet but for the dwarf's bellows breathing and the drip of blood off a dozen edges. It was over. Doreen walked over to the rock. It was honestly astonishing, she thought, that Balin hadn't gone down, beaten in a blind rage, blow after blow after blow, and the dwarf had simply refused. No glory in it, no grand heroic light. He just stood in the mud and been too stubborn to die, the same as he was too stubborn to do most sensible things. But Balin was a wreck to look at. His beard ran red and his nose sat crooked, one eye swelling shut, and there wasn't a plate of his armor that hadn't been dented or scored by the hammering. But he stood, and there was something close to satisfaction under all the blood. A giant was an honor to kill, to a dwarf, and there'd been two. Balin had felled the first, Karma had opened the second. The dwarf caught the paladin's eye across the bodies, and Karma gave him a single short nod, and Balin returned it. Nothing said. Two men who'd held the middle and were still breathing. Doreen dug through her pack with fingers that still trembled, found a healing potion among her things. She always carried more than she let on, and pressed it into Zyra's hand.
For
She gave up on the word and just folded Zyra's fingers around the vial. For the wounded, for Balin, for Karma, for whoever needs it. Zyra seemed to understand. She always understood more than Doreen wanted her to. They rested then what little they dared. Karma went among them with the last of his god's grace, tending Doreen's split face until the swelling eased and the words came back to her tongue, then turning that cold, mending fire on himself, on the deep wound in his side and the burns, and last on Balin, who sat like a boulder himself and let it happen, and said nothing. Zyra and Elara had come through near untouched, the elf without a scratch beyond the cut he'd carried in, the sorceress having spent the fight at its edges, her work the kind that didn't draw a giant's club. When Doreen could speak again, she tried for the light thing she'd wanted earlier, the thing to put the world back on its hinges.
hey, we're a tough lot, eh? Just like that. 2 hill giants down.
She snapped her fingers, winced.
Walk in, kill the mountains, walk out. Easy as breathing.
Balin looked at her from under his blood-matted brows, and his mouth moved in what might, on a generous day, be called the cousin of a smile.
Easy as breathing, she says.
He spat red into the dirt.
2 giants is a hard day's killing. Don't go counting the next ones cheap.
But it was something, and they all knew it was something. And for a moment the thin, cracked thing that held the 5 of them together held. Then Zyra was up and moving again, the fear and the urgency back in her face, hurting them with that flat, brooking, no-argument voice.
We have to move on. The roots, the call.
Aye, aye. Before the green takes the red. We know.
The party went down into the cave mouth, into the close reek and the dark, and made for the buried castle's gate. An easy walk after the giants. 3 goblins stood a nervous guard at the inner stronghold. Karma charged with a roar despite his leg, and the rest loosed over his shoulders. Doreen's arrow took one through the chest, Elara's another through the throat, and the third took one look at the dwarf and fled shrieking into the warren. And after that, with the goblins fled and the dead behind them, and the smell of the deep places rising up to meet them, they came once more to the dragon door. It stood as they had left it, taller than 2 men. The coiled and rampant dragon worked across its dark face, the whole of it pulsing with that slow, deep blue light like the breathing of a thing asleep. The glow fell on their 5 faces and made them all strange to one another. Karma's burn, Balin's blood, Elara's whispering smile, Zyra's emptiness, and Doreen's own swollen, watchful face. The face of a woman who carried a great, heavy pile of things she knew and had told no one, and one thing now that she didn't. Whatever she'd lost in the grass would come back. Things always came back. That was how she survived. You held on. You stayed awake when everyone thought you slept. You kept your pile and waited.
Rhaid o brengen lysgyntan yn y ffin yn gweithio sbryn o'r gorwydd tan. Awto! like a wedding ring. Kept your hands clean with a borrowed name. But every oath left a bleeding seam, and every hymn learned to bend the flame. Each watcher carves a god from the same old stone. We kneel to the heaven marks and call them thrones. The truest face in the hall was never shown at all. The truest face in the hall was never shown at beneath the gold, the splinters glow. Beneath the vow,